Okay.
We've got 33 people and counting online. We'll get started in a couple minutes. I'll introduce everybody and then we'll kick it off.
Good.
So, yeah.
And I looked, Tim, you only have 97 slides, so that'll go quickly.
That's
I was like, oh no.
That's
Now that
right.
it's 11:30, just zap through them as quick as you can because we'll make good use of our it's 0.3 seconds per slide. So
That's all you, man. You're doing that driving.
There you go.
I'm just hanging on.
All right. Well, it is 12:30. We do have people still continuing to join. Let me give it about another 30 seconds, John, and
Good.
we'll and Tim will do the introduction. So I appreciate everybody taking a half an hour out of their day to come and get some tactics. Our goal is to give you things that you guys can use and implement right away. Certainly, if you have questions, as we go through these webinars and even after, reach out to us. I'm pleased to be joined with John Vanderslice. John, I'll let John and Tim introduce themselves. And Tim Barry, I'm Jim Wilcox. I own a Sandler Performance Center in Fort Wayne and South Bend, Indiana. We service clients in this general area. Northern Indiana, all of Indiana really, although Evansville is quite a haul, but we do service all of Indiana and other areas. John, you want to give yourself a quick introduction and then we'll get this thing rolling?
Sure. So I'm John Vanderslice. I own a Sandler Performance Center here in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. We deal primarily with what we call here the Delaware Valley, which is New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware. We do have clients around the country and other parts of the world, but that primarily the people that come to us are local. So most of our stuff is within people come as far away as for us typically. I don't know what it is for you, Jim, about 75 miles or so. Yeah.
Yeah, hour and a half, 2 hours at the most.
Yep.
Yeah, they'll make the effort to come see us. Tim, tell
I'll
people
be
where you
super
are.
quick. Tim Barry. I own the Sandler Performance Center in Fort Worth, Texas. Got clients all over the country, and we're in the great Republic of Texas at this point. So anyway, excited to be here and ready to roll.
All right. Appreciate you guys being with me. So the topic today is coaching. This is 30 minutes on the how of coaching. But as we were talking about this session and, the takeaways that we want to be able to give to people, there's a lot of confusion out there on coaching. And John, I think that you had made some comments yesterday when we were talking about coaching. Do you want to share some of those comments to kick us off?
Yeah, and I'm going to try to go quick because we got 30 minutes. But I want to do this because we've been doing a ton of these webinars, as you guys know, and it's difficult sometimes to get interaction, right? Because people maybe you're not comfortable asking questions. So I want to put a challenge out to you that during the call, if you come up with some questions, if you have some thoughts, we'd love to hear them. Throw them into the chat box. And here's what we'll do. So I have this great book here called the Sales Coach's Playbook.
There you go.
Whoever asks the best question during or after the session, I will send you this book and I'll have Jim and Tim autograph it for you. I will not sign it, but you don't need my,
there you go.
it would be far too valuable, but we're happy to do that. So it's really important that we have that interaction, okay? So we want to do that. So before I throw my comments in, I'm going to throw some stuff in up front. And then I really want to turn it over to Tim because he worked for and with Bill Bartlett, who authored the book, The Sales Coach's Playbook, and he's got a ton to share. So I just want to level set a little bit. So prior to my time in Sandler, I was a turnaround guy in business. And what that means is we took failing and underperforming businesses, took them over completely, turned them around, and moved on to the next one. Now, over the course of about 25 years, very fortunately, we never lost one, and we never came close, and we did well. And in my last part, when I was in the corporate world, I was director of sales for a large international chemical company. We had 46,000 employees, and I was also head of distribution excellence and channel management strategy. Now, the reason I share that with you is in this chemical company, we had 46,000 employees, and we had a group called Management Talents, which reflected less than 0.5% of all employees. And within Management Talents, our main focus was coaching and development of these key people. If you were in Management Talents, the idea was you were deemed to be able to grow at least 2 levels higher than your current position. And Evonik Industries, this chemical company, was number 1 or number 2 in the world in every market they served. And we worked tirelessly on engagement, to get people engaged, get them on the same view and on the same pace with what the company's vision was. And when I work today with smaller and mid-sized businesses, and even some quite large businesses, oftentimes I'm working with leaders, it's about how to build their bench strength and how to develop their employees. And we've spent a lot of time in this and put a lot of effort over a long time. And there's some key things I just want to point out about coaching before Tim gets rolling. The coaching is a proactive process. It is not a reactive process. I see too many times that we react. A situation comes up and we react and we respond to what we're seeing, and we attempt to do coaching, which turns into be training or correcting, and we end up creating this, as Tim will probably expand on, this shared helplessness. So I want to point out that whatever we talk about in coaching is a proactive process. It is not reactive. And employees and people, us, learn best when we're able to determine answers for ourselves. And when we answer people's challenges, we don't really help them grow. So there's a couple of those things I want you to keep in mind. And I guess one last thing I was thinking about this morning was I just experienced with a CEO. People want recognition. It's important in these coaching sessions that you'll do is to recognize people for their accomplishments. Idle, glad-handing, or kind of false compliments actually can have a reverse effect and a negative effect and hurt your credibility and the trust factor when we're coaching people. So I just wanted to share a couple of those things with you. And then lastly, it's really, really important that when you're coaching, that you listen well. Listening and really trying to understand someone's perspective, not our own, helps build those relationships that are critical for people when coaching, okay? So thanks for listening to that. I wanted to share that. And remember, good questions, you get the book, all right?
There you go. Awesome.
Take it away, Timmy.
Yeah, so John, thanks for that. Real good observation in pointing out that coaching it's a proactive process. Coaching is not an event. And the challenges that we have as leaders are we should be doing way more one-on-one coaching. So let me back up just a hair and discuss what coaching is versus what training is, because a lot of leaders make the mistake and they muddle the two. So training is when you are delivering you're teaching people new skills. And that could be you're going to have training in any job, any role. There should be continuous training, and that's wonderful. Coaching is taking an employee that has a skill and helping them figure out how to apply that skill more efficiently and more correctly. And so there's a massive difference. Coaching, a lot of times, if the leader is for example, a high dominant and they just want stuff done, a lot of leaders will skip the part where and they'll leverage a coaching session to either just do it for them or tell an employee or a staff team member what to do. There's a massive difference between the coaching and the training piece. The second piece is when you get started in a coaching engagement, a leader should spend their time, and I'll challenge you to write this down. The time breakdown that effective high-performing leaders leverage is they use 45% of their time supervising their team. And that's holding them accountable to their actions, working with them on their behavior cookbooks. It's supervising them. 35% of a high-performing leader's time should be spent coaching. 10% should be training new skills to the team, and then 10% should be in mentoring. So the 45, 35, 10, 10 breakdown, those are the high-performing leaders that we work with. That's how they operate, their own calendar. And so I think it's very, very important to take a look at how much time you're spending coaching. Most leaders get tied into the minutia, and so they spend way more time supervising and way less time coaching. John, does that make sense?
Oh, totally. I think it makes great sense. And Rob already asked a great question. He said, how often do you recommend one-on-one meeting with someone, with your sales team? So yeah, it's great. And we tend to get too much into training, and coaching is a much higher level use of our time as leaders, for our people.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess to answer Rob's question, for me and my clients, I tell them that they, as the clients, have to schedule coaching sessions with me. I'm not going to schedule a coaching session just for the sake of having a coaching session. It needs to be about something specific, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There has to be a real strategic and even tactical nature to it, and it can't be forced. So I'm not going to force coaching on my team. I'll remind them, that coaching is available, and when it's time, then they can call them pretty much as within reason, of course. They can call them almost at will. Typical client will do once a month, maybe twice a month, to double back and handle it from there. So that's about the frequency that coaching occurs. Jim, what's your experience with that?
In terms of, I apologize, Tim, I was answering a question in the chat box that I was just going to bring up. There was a great question in there that two people asked the exact same question, but you asked me something specific, Tim. I apologize.
No. It's just how frequently are you finding you're delivering coaching to your team and even to your clients?
Yeah, I think John had answered in the chat box, no more than once a week, no less than once a month, right? And I think somewhere in there, we will find the right cadence. I agree with that 100% in terms of doing coaching. We do, in our business here, we do weekly individual meetings, and those meetings are a combination of reporting in on some specific metrics, and there's a coaching conversation in there as well. And so those happen weekly in this organization. Culturally, you got to figure out, what's the right cadence for you and the individual being coached, right? Some people may need more time depending on what the goal of the coaching is. Others may need less.
Great point. Great point. I think another interesting concept is because the high-performing leaders are investing 35% of their time into coaching their teams, and it's a process. It's not an event. Coaching needs to be a process. You've got to develop trust, with the people that you're coaching. Here's another piece of information I want to challenge everybody to write down. As a leader, as someone who's going to coach other people, you've got to establish what we call the 3 Ps. And the 3 Ps are incredibly important to do on the front end. Here's what the 3 Ps are. The first P stands for position. And as a leader, we have to recognize that we've got positional authority. If you're a CEO or if you're a supervisor, it doesn't actually matter. You've got authority over them. And so if you're going to have an effective coaching relationship with someone, you've got to suspend your positional authority in the first place. You can't have the threat of the wrath of God come down on them, in a coaching session. A coaching session it's an intimate setting, one-on-one conversation. You're helping them work through these various skills that they're struggling with. They have to be vulnerable, and as the coach, we have to suspend that positional authority. The second P stands for permission. And permission means that we really have to grant them the permission to speak freely, and to not worry about how it comes out, or we have to encourage them to be vulnerable with us, so we can really truly help them at the root of the conversation in the first place. The third P stands for protection. And protection is important because, again, if we're having the team member come to us, we've got to give them the protection that they're not going to be punished for the things that they share in the coaching sessions with us. So those are the three ways to really set the tone. And I always make sure that when I'm coaching my own team, for example, I restate the three Ps each time to make sure that they're understanding. I'm not the boss here. My boss hat is off. My coach hat is on. You've got permission to speak freely, be vulnerable. There's not gonna be any steamrolling or judgments involved. And then three, what happens in coaching stays in coaching. Honestly, there's only two times that I qualify that, and that's if someone is going to, someone's going to hurt themselves or hurt another, then that's the only time that I would breach the protection piece, or anything like that. So,
Tim, can we pause there for a second? Because I think this is worth noting, right? And I put it on I just shared the whiteboard. Hopefully people can see that, just those three Ps. And I think that the point has been made that just because we sit down with somebody and say, hey, we're going to have a coaching session, and I'm going to set my positional authority aside. I'm going to give you permission to speak freely, and you have the protection to know that anything that's talked about here, short of anything illegal, right, stays here. Just because I state that doesn't mean it's going to be true in the first one to several coaching sessions. It takes time, especially if you're just starting, especially if you've never done it, especially if somebody may be intimidated initially by, sitting down for those first coaching sessions. So I think it's important really to stress that coaching is a marathon in part because of this very thing that you've been talking about.
Great thought, Jim. Yeah, and that just goes back to, the expectations. My experience has been in the beginning of beginning a coaching relationship with someone. It'll take a certain number of coach-driven agendas in the first place. It's until you set up the correct boundaries, until there's that trust, until that relationship is solid, and going forward, it's more coach-driven. However, in the world of Sandler, we leverage something called upfront contracts in everything that we do. And all an upfront contract is it's a mutually agreed upon agenda that is agreed upon before you get into a conversation, and then there's clear next steps after it's all said and done. And so again, while you're working on building the trust, and if you set the upfront contract, with your coaching client or with your team member that you're coaching, set it up. Here's what excellence looks like. Here's what a coaching session will look like. We'll have to maybe drive that in the beginning, but then it gets super easy, because once your team member starts driving those coaching sessions, they get to set the agenda, and then our job gets infinitely easier and more intimate, because it's things they want to talk about. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You bet.
What's happening in the chat? We've got about 10 minutes left. What are some of the good thoughts that are coming out of chat?
We got a lot of great questions.
We really do. Yeah, I think that Leo, so if I go from the bottom up, Leo asks a great question. What is the best technique when coaching to prevent yourself from giving answers all the time and to allow your employee to drive the conversation and be more proactive in a session?
Yeah, I think that's something that we have to do as the coaches. We have to check our ego at the door. We have to check our need to look smart, at the door. Leo, the answer is that if you as the coach start giving people the answer, you rob them of the opportunity to figure the things out of themselves. And so the challenge is you have to be aware of your own temperament. And if you're a serial rescuer, which a lot of us are, then the challenge for us is we have to suspend that need to give them the answers. We have to suspend the need to look smart, and remember that the coaching is not about us. What we're trying to do is help them come up with the best answer. Again, because you're not training. This isn't training for a new skill. This is taking one that they already have and figuring out how to do it way more effectively.
So Tim, I jotted a couple things down in the chat. I think that, a fundamental of coaching is, sometimes it takes 5 whys to get to the real root cause. So that's a technique you could use, is simply, why do you think that happened that way? Why do you suppose that is? There's a number of why questions you can ask. Another one is, and we have this on our management cheat sheet, is taking the path of what, why, impact, why, what. And so what's the scenario? Why do you think it went down that way? What's the impact of it? Why might it make sense to do something different? And what are you committed to doing different? So that's another mnemonic, if you will, for coaching. I'm sure you guys know a number of others that we could add to this list. So just a couple thoughts there. If you have something to add to the list, great. If not, we can move on to the next question, because we have a number of great questions here.
Yeah, let's I don't have anything to add. John, you got anything else?
Yeah, one thing I would say, and we learned this through experience, again, coaching techniques are great. I think one thing we want to be cognizant of is, much like we are in selling, right? We don't want to get over scripted and make it too stiff of a process, because then it becomes almost like an accountability or a gotcha exercise. And I think, to the best we can, much like, again, when we're selling, it needs to be about the person we're sitting across the desk from, or we're sitting next to. It's about them, and it's understanding them and responding. Sometimes I see coaching get a little bit too rigid, and then it just becomes almost like a thing rather than something that actually brings out the best in people. Because our goal as leaders is really about helping people get further with our help than they can get on their own. Yeah. And we've got to just be careful that we don't formalize the process. We want to have structure to it, but still it's about understanding and having a framework to help them move forward.
Indeed.
Go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, Richard Volker has a great question, which is, are there any metrics that have measured this time committed to coaching to real growth in the individual or bottom line performance? I definitely have a thought on that. John, Tim, don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Go for it.
I think part of the coaching process, Richard, and others who may be wondering the same thing, is setting specific metrics or setting specific goals with the individual, right? If we're going to sit down and have coaching discussions, we should be doing that for a reason. And coaching should have some sort of outcome to it, right? Short-term and long-term. So setting specific goals with the individual, I think, is an important part of coaching. John, Tim, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, to build on that, Jim, I think the coaching is not a counseling session. It isn't. And if it if it feels like it's starting to turn into one, you need to really consider slowing your roll on that one, because coaching is not counseling. And so there are metrics that you can set up in the beginning. You can add to those goals. They can be short, intermediate, and long-term goals. And then you start to, as you coach through the things, you've got to stack rank and prioritize. Okay, what do you want to handle first? What's the burning one? I get this from salespeople all the time. They hate cold calling and prospecting for new business. And so then it becomes, we have to not just deal with the superficial. We have to get into what are the belief systems that they're encouraging to make that thing happen. And so
right.
The goal for us as coaches is we have to take whatever that belief system is, and look at what's the exact opposite of that. So just to use a silly example, maybe, I hear this, I hate cold calling. Okay, so what's the opposite of I hate cold calling? I love cold calling. Okay, great. Now you can build a behavior plan that includes the activities to support the new belief that you love cold calling, and you can set up your short, medium, and intermediate behaviors to support that new system. And then of course it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. John?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's, again, I think the important thing is, and we experienced this, I mean, we worked extremely hard and spent a lot of money on trying to build engagement. And one thing we learned is, and it's a very simple thing, a lot of times the simplest things have the biggest impact, is that people come at things from different perspectives. Behavioral styles play into things. Some people need to know the what, that's plenty. Some people need to know the what and the why. Some people know the what, the why, and then how can I do it? How are we doing it? And they need different degrees of information. It depends on where they are in their career. Some things we're coaching for short term in their current position. Other things we're coaching for further growth. So it's a very much a symbiotic relationship. One of the things I really like, one of my favorite things I like to tell people is set the expectation of, here's what I'm going to take responsibility for on this coaching thing. Now, here's what I'd like you to take responsibility for. If any time you have questions, if you're not clear on anything, if you're not sure what direction we're going, I want you to be comfortable enough to bring that to me. Can you take responsibility for that? And then it's yes, then they take it, but it's a questioning thing. It's not saying, here, I want you to do this. And then it just creates a much tighter bond.
Yeah. Well said, John. We got a couple other questions in the chat box that I think are great. Brian asks, how do you separate employee behaviors that need coaching attention versus supervising attention? I think there's a couple things there. Number one, we speak literally in talking about the hats that we're wearing, right? So if we're sitting down, if John and I are sitting down for a coaching interaction, and I suddenly realize through this that, hey, there's a supervisory issue. John is not following the rules or the process that has been defined and agreed upon by the company and the employee, then I may have to say to John, I'm literally taking my coaching hat off. I have to put my supervisor hat on here, and we're going to have that discussion now. So I think that provides a good visual and a good talk track, if you will, for moving between those roles when you have to. But beyond that, I would define coaching as behaviors where somebody, you or the individual, are looking for growth or change in those behaviors that they're willing to engage in, I think that supervision is, has more to do with following the rules, engaging in the process, et cetera. Don't know if you have any further comments on that. We can move to another question if not.
I think you got it.
All right. Joy asks, what are some examples of what an employee might say that they need coaching on, and how do you motivate them to desire that coaching?
Well, I think a pretty easy one, at least in my world, is they'll have somebody will come to me and say, hey, I need coaching on the execution of the Sandler sales system, and then that's something that I'll hear. Then you have to get more specific, obviously, into which parts of that are they struggling with and whatnot. But people can bring all kinds. Remember that coaching involves having an existing skill that they're struggling with applying more effectively.
Yeah. So they'll say, I don't know how, or I don't. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Again, I want to encourage you. Don't let these things turn into be a complaint session. This is not a pity party. Coaching is not, not work counseling session. It's very, very, very specific. So.
Yep. All right. So we're at the top of the hour. I just want to really quick go through one last thought on coaching, and then we'll shut this call down. We'll send the recording out to everybody. But for those hanging on, John, one last thought.
No, I was just going to say to the second part of that question, how do we get them to desire coaching? That's an awesome question, because we don't want to have to be saying, okay, here's your coaching, here's what we're going to do. It's people need to understand what's in it for them. And we don't do a good job oftentimes as leaders and companies. We think about what we want, but much like our clients, what do you want? What's in it for you, right? What's the benefit of this coaching? We have to understand that and help people understand that, and then they will desire coaching. It can't be something we put on them. It's got to be something they see the benefit of.
Awesome. Tim, last thought?
No, you know what? I just think, again, the separation of coaching versus training is going to be huge. Building trust, realizing that this is a process. It's not an event. And then no joke, where the top performers are spending 35% of their time coaching. Do a gut check and take a look at where you're at in terms of coaching to measure your own performance.
Yep. And my last comment actually has to do with a question that Chris Sands asked. And Chris, we can chat one-on-one, but one thing to think about when you think about these four hats of management, right? We talked about coaching, supervising. There's also training and mentoring. Supervision, the authority from supervision comes from the position. If I'm a manager, my position dictates that I have supervision capabilities. All the rest of them come from your relationship with the employee. Coaching, training, and mentoring are relationship-based, and then supervision is position-based. So that would be my last thought there. I appreciate everybody for taking a half an hour out of their day. Hopefully we were able to bring value to you guys. John, who wins the book?
You know what, Jim? There's nothing I like better than doing something like this, is spending your money. So here's the thing.
I'm sending two books out, aren't I?
I think anybody that asked a question gets a book.
There we go.
Good job, Jim. You're a generous man. You're a smart man. You're a handsome man. So thank you.
Well, I'll collect them and I'll send out a book. So awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it. Be well.
You bet. Have a great day.
Rest of the week.
Take care.
Bye now.